Hello, loves, and welcome to this Instagram Live on the new moon with Shalyn Isaacs. Um, Very excited to bring her on to this call. Hey, she's here. I'm going to just give a little intro first. Just want to say that Shalyn is a registered psychotherapist, writer, and public speaker who works at the intersection of psychology and spirituality, which I find absolutely fascinating. And she has a private practice based in Toronto, Canada, where she supports Black, Indigenous, and women of color who with reconnecting to their true self, their soul, to experience healing, aliveness, and liberation. And as I read that, I am just reminded of how we got interested in each other's work. Yes, so excited to connect with Shalyn. Let me get, there we go. Hey. Sometimes Instagram is very funny when I'm trying to bring people on. Hopefully she'll answer. Hey!
Hi, Sonali. I have not done an Instagram live in a long time, so this is nice.
It's so good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for that introduction. I'm so excited to speak with you. I was having such a deja vu while you were speaking. I was like, why do I feel like we've been here before?
Oh, hey, Renee.
So
Hello,
funny.
Jean. Maybe you know some of the people that have joined us. I don't know, but if you recognize names. Hello, everyone. Yes, to deja vu. I feel like because it's been a few months, right, that we've been, or several months since we first like connected, and then I started doing um, this Instagram live series. I'm like, let's have a conversation. So I know we've been waiting for a while. So sometimes it feels like it's already happened.
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, it's there's been a lot of back and forth, so this is really nice to connect like this. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for being willing and for being here. And I'll say just briefly, I usually do just a little bit about this series and how it got started because I, I felt very passionate for a while. I don't know, a couple of years at least about this idea of sensual sovereignty. And then I kind of defined it for myself and to share it of embodied love, liberation, and the license to expand the expression of our true essence. And then still, even as I say it, it's like it's very theoretical, it's very like abstract in a way. So I got this idea to start having conversations to breathe life into it, like to talk to other bodies of culture, like and and where they are and how this has been expressed in their own lives. So that's kind of how it started. Oh, and because my first guest talked about stepping outside of the box and smashing the box and burning the box. That really resonated for me.
Me too.
Cosmos, my first guest. So I was like, oh, I'm going to add that to it because it felt all related. Like as we expand into the expression of our true essence, like we're moving outside of boxes and things like that.
Yes, to all of that. I love that so much. Um, Even as you were talking about sensual sovereignty and your ideas around that, how it can feel very abstract, makes me think about how we're often told to always fit our ideas and communicate them in a very neat little package that
Yes.
everyone can understand. I think it's so beautiful that you're just expressing your ideas and yourself in this way that I think people will just connect with by the energy of what you're saying and talking about. Like, we'll get the message.
Yes, yes, yes. I think for myself and so many others that I speak to, we've had to do that a bit in our own lives somehow, to like to be able to shed and break outside the boxes and things like that. I'm hearing something in the sound, and I don't know. Do you hear an echo? Oh, hello.
You know what? It might be my window. I'm gonna close my window and see if that helps.
Okay,
But
okay. It could also be over here. No.
there we go.
Hello, Asif. So, can you please explain this topic in the simplest way? Good question. Um, I kind of think that we are here. That's a really good question, how to explain it simply. But I really do feel like we're here to express, to be, yeah, lots of voice distortion. Is that for me? I might be for me, and I don't know. I hear it on my end.
I'm going to try maybe muting myself when you speak.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see if that helps.
Okay. Oh, okay. Maybe there's something there, and I don't know what that is. It's so interesting. But I do have this whole like the mic set up to, the phone and all these things. So I never know. There's always something. There's almost every call there's something that happens. This is what happens when we're live. But I do feel like I want to acknowledge that we did have something we want to drop into. So I've not forgotten about that. What we talked about for the new moon and life and death and the cycles. Okay, so it's better. So I wonder if it's something that's kind of feeding back. We'll play with it a little bit. But I do want to say that I really do believe that when we're here, I'm just going to go very broad here, but when we're here in a human body, we come with some kind of blueprint, like something that our soul wants to express in this lifetime. And then we're discovering that as we go, and we face all kinds of life experiences and all kinds of things. But as we get truer and truer to that, as we really can get closer to that expression, we'll feel it. I guess that's the one thing. Like we'll just feel it in our bodies as an alignment, as a truth that we're living, and a lot of discomfort that we might feel, or illnesses, or other things that show up in the body, and they could show up mind, body. I've definitely had my own mental health stuff that has shown up and probably will, still, but showed up a lot in my life. That was probably my entry into a path of exploring and discovery, self-discovery. But yeah, that's what I feel like that sensual sovereignty is really about. It's that when we get deeper into this, we are an expression of love, of liberation, and we give ourselves permission, we give ourselves license to express in that way. Yeah, I'm trying to get connected as much as possible. Yes. Well, thank you for being here, and let's see where this conversation goes. So I wanted to, well, first ask Shalyn if there's maybe something you wanted to speak to that about the idea of sensual sovereignty, or the idea of, those are just words that I connect with, but the idea of this expression that you've observed for yourself or with your work.
Yeah, I think that, like when you mentioned mental health, I think about how sometimes we live in a society that, at least where I'm in Toronto, Canada, that we are encouraged to be happy all the time and to just feel into the, to always be chasing happiness. And I think that when we want to be happy all the time, there ends up being shame that we feel around any kinds of emotions that might be darker or more uncomfortable, that don't conform with maybe what society wants us to feel. And I think that relates to sensuality, because when we can sometimes, I know it's hard, but like allow ourselves to go into those dark places, those uncomfortable emotions, gradually and slowly over time, I think it allows us to connect to the sensuality, the depth of emotion that lies in those spaces that are so difficult to touch. But when we get to touch those maybe darker emotions or feelings in the body, then we get to experience the fullness of this human experience that is so beyond just happiness or just um, things that keep us more comfortable and feel good all the time. Um, yeah, that's how I think about it lately.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
It's like I've been thinking about like the life, death, life processes that we see in nature, how that relates to the human experience. Like how we see it in spring will always turn to summer, summer will always turn to fall and winter. We can't have spring without winter. I think just like we can't have, it's very difficult to access feelings of joy and peace and love in our life and to be able to receive those emotions when um, we're unable to access the and to go into the darker places as well. I think for me, my issue has been that I tend to stay in the darker places. I'm very comfortable there. I'm like,
Me
this,
too.
I'm like, if there's harder, darker times in my life, I get stuck like analyzing them and feeling into them. I'm like, this is so interesting and cool. And I tend to get very philosophical during those times. And I think for me, I have to, at this time in my life, I'm also recognizing that, okay, you're also allowed to come out of the pain. You're allowed to come out of the suffering, to be able to see that there's another side of life at the same time, just like there's yin and yang,
Mhm.
um, where uh, we can go into the harder places, but we're also allowed to have access to ease and sensuality and
Mhm.
compassion. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yes. I really appreciate you bringing this up.
yeah. I think that's what I've been feeling into lately. Because it's really hard to, I feel like we don't live in a world that encourages us to be fully human,
Mhm.
to experience the fullness of our humanity. It's often like just stay in your head, stay at the intellectual philosophical level. Emotions and feelings in the body cannot be trusted. um, but it's like there's so much wisdom in the body and our emotions in the diverse small and large experiences we have.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think those are very spiritual experiences, even if we're able to like be by the water and feel connected to the water or to a tree or to a flower. It's
Mhm.
something so small, but there's so much depth in those spaces at the same time. I don't know
Mhm.
where this is I'm going with this. I hope this makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. I mean, I've had, especially in the last several months, focus. I think it's when I'm speaking, there is some kind of a feedback. I don't know what. Um, okay, maybe it's better.
Yeah, sorry. I remembered to turn off my mic when you're speaking.
Oh gosh, it's too bad it has to be quite like that. But um, I was just thinking, I have had this focus on pleasure, like in these last, well, for a while, but then really in my work in this year, let's say for sure. And it's reminded me that, and first of all, this is very unlike what I'm used to, and I really relate to this, the comfort in the darkness, the comfort in the shadow, and I can be in there. I can be very comfortable in it myself in these times I've had in my life. And they've been painful at times too, but then it's also like a comfort and just, it's a familiarity, and it also does bring up so much from a younger age about like existential questions. I started questioning at a young age because of these dark kind of moments I would have of, why am I here? What's the purpose of life? Like those kind of questions. So it's interesting that my whole life journey now has brought me into this like delving into pleasure. But as I say it and as I even talk about it, it's just like what you're saying about, oh, we can't just have happiness. We can't just have spring all the time. This isn't the natural cycle. Um, I'm coming to learn and experience for myself how allowing and experience more of pleasure is creating this bigger container to kind of hold the other things, because those other parts are inherent. They're not going anywhere. Grief, sorrow, sadness, anxiety, like whatever the things are. I'm also trained in mental health, so we have a whole slew of terms for that end. But it's like, as we understand that cycle that you were talking about, that natural cycle, um, I think it helps so much, and it also allows us to experience this whole breadth, this whole spectrum of emotion, which is like the wonder of life, right? To really experience it all. And it's super expansive then. And then it doesn't keep us in that, like, um, I, for me, depression, anxiety, very familiar, very much a part of like many years of my life, basically. But it kind of keeps it all in a perspective, like, and as we help others too, like if they're in a dark place, if they're going through something, to just understand that, well, the cycle of that is that spring follows winter. And like, and just that understanding, um, I think it helps so much.
I really liked what you said about the container, that when we're able to access feelings of pleasure and joy in our lives, that it expands our capacity to hold a lot more of life in, like, the good and the bad and the difficult and uncomfortable and the peaceful. It like, you can see I'm like literally expanding my body as I'm saying that. It feels like you're in I feel like when you're able to access greater feelings of pleasure and joy in your life, which I think is so important for women of color in particular, that you're able to tap into a kind of wisdom in your body that systems of oppression don't want you to tap into.
Absolutely.
And it's like that wisdom can be so liberating for yourself, but also for your communities and relationships. And it's yeah, it's mess. I feel like it's messy work sometimes to get there, to access that. It takes like time and unlayering and unraveling
Yes.
the parts of ourselves that or the messages that we've internalized from people or institutions
Mhm.
that tell us we're not supposed to access, though, access joy, access pleasure. Those aren't for you. And it's like by accessing those things, it's being transgressive to systems that want us to stay in the pain and stay in the suffering and stay in very kind of stay in the oppression.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I'm been thinking of lately, and how uh, like in these places where it's like there's how do I say this? Hang on, give me 1 second. I have a thought, and for some reason I feel it in my body, but my head is like, no, say this, something different. Um,
We can pause. It's okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Allow.
yeah, I do this with my clients sometimes of like reformulating a thought or a question. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it's almost like when we're able to, in those darker times in our lives or the more stressful times, there's like, if you've ever experienced, there's like a gap somewhere. There might be like some slither of light when you're going for a walk or when you're hanging out with a friend or a partner or something like that, which we might not always think are such big things or important things, but like that sense of community, I
Mhm.
feel like can create this gap in the midst of our suffering where we're able to access feelings of, oh, I'm not alone in this
Mhm.
experience, I'm not
Mhm.
alone in the suffering, and that our pain and our joy can be shared, and our wisdom therefore can also be shared amongst each other, and we can support each other. And even like conversations like these, I feel like bring so much light to that sense of community holding in a society that's always talking to us about individualism and competition and striving for your survival all the time.
Yes.
It's so beautiful to tap into the wisdom in our own bodies, but within the wisdom of other bodies at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think in all of this, finding resource is so important. And and I see like joy as a resource. I see pleasure as a resource. I see community as a resource. And I find all of this, our own resilience, of course, as a resource, but being able to access resource when we're in places of um, a lot of darkness can feel like that like sliver of light, that little glimmer, like something at the end of the tunnel, that like just a something that is so calming, that is so grounding, that tells us like just hang in there, like it's going to be okay, you're not alone. um, I'm reminded, I just came off in this morning a call in a group I'm in, with a teacher, uh, which is about somatic abolitionism. So that's a whole whenever I say the words, I feel it also, like it's a lot. People are like, what is that? What's that about? But I want to just name it. It's somatic abolitionism. The teacher is Resmaa Menakem, another therapist, a somatic experiencing therapist. And one of the things like now I feel it, like I understand it. And when I see it and experience it, I know it is the structure that's created by, I mean, he would say probably white body supremacy. I have another teacher. I'm going to mention these two teachers. So the teacher, Dr. Rocio Rosales Meza, who does a lot of decolonial work. So she will talk about the colonial capitalistic patriarchy. But all of these are oppressive systems, really. But those systems keep us, like, he will talk about the vertical axis being the white bodies at the top of the vertical axis, and then all of the bodies of culture, all of the bodies of, melanated bodies, like all of us are in this horizontal axis. And when it's structured like that, it's like there's nothing that we can really do to get up on that vertical axis, because we're not on it, like we're in this middle. So it pits us against each other. It's like that structure in itself puts us, keeps us oppressed, very oppressed, and also in this very insidious way that now we're using our time, energy, resources to like fight with each other. We have all the colorism, and we have all this like classism stuff, like all this stuff that keeps us really oppressed, So I don't know. Sorry, that was a pretty long explanation, but it was coming to me as you were talking, because I think it's so true that for women of color, like we're in this, there's the patriarchy, so we're already in this like oppressed state, and then because of basically white body supremacy, this other systemic structure, we're kept in these spaces of competition, of comparison, of like in these very unhealthy ways, that this is something that inspired that I get so inspired by everyone I speak with. It's like, let's connect, let's collaborate, let's step out of this structure that we're placed in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. As I was speaking, I was thinking about the work of Resmaa Menakem. So awesome that you mentioned him, and I'm currently in the program with Dr. Rosales.
Oh,
So that's really, it shows that there's a interconnection happening here.
I'm not surprised
That's so funny. Um, but yeah, like I heard this term today. It was called the sister wound. And it was a South Asian woman said this term that I'd never heard before, the sister wound. And I was like, oh, that's what. Um, I think it connects with what you were saying about the horizontal axis, of how instead of sometimes because of white body supremacy, because of the individualism and the competition that's so ingrained in that colonial ideology, there's this sense of we can't support each other, but we have to always be um, in competition with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think especially at least in my experience has been in communities with South Asian women, there's a sense of wanting that sense of sisterhood, that sense of mutual support and upliftment. But there's also a little bit of like, ooh, I need to see how close I can get because I've been hurt before. In
Yes.
some way, I might have been hurt by some of the messages I've received within my community. So I need to check you out a little first before we can really connect. That's been my experience with a lot of folks in my community, anyways. Um, but yeah, I think there's this question. I feel like there's so many, I feel like a lot of us at this point in time are having more awareness, more, there's like a raising of consciousness that's happening around the ways that systems of oppression impact the mental health and the well-being of particularly Black, Indigenous, and women of color. And some of the questions I'm asking myself are, how do we want to, as we raise our awareness of how these systems impact us, how do we want to be in the world? How do we want to live in relationships with each other, with our spirit, with the earth? I feel like in terms of talking about the death and rebirth process, as we're like raising our awareness, what do we want to let die, and what do we want to birth or bring out into the world? What do we want to be born from ourselves? And I think of that as like an inherent spiritual journey, of really reconnecting with the part of ourself that I think a lot of us have been taught to disconnect from because of trauma, because of the messages we've received from these systems. And I think that healing, that for me anyways, I feel like the healing journey of and liberation comes from us reconnecting or experiencing reconnection to the self. That might be like the soul or the spirit, the universe, the earth, whatever people's conception of self is. And I feel like I'm still like, I don't know how that sounds with you. That's what I'm gravitating towards. And there's this little academic voice in my head that's like, but no, there's no room for spirituality in people's mental health journeys or in their lived experiences. And yeah, I'm kind of battling that voice a little bit. But yeah, I was just wondering what you think about that, about what is the role of, um, if you feel like there is a role of connecting to spirit or our spirituality, our spiritual journeys in liberation.
It's so good. I mean, that just speaks so much to my own experience. I think it's essential. I would say I think it's hugely important. I think that it's something that Western medicine, Western psychology, you know, does not highlight, you know, in any kind of way, because we learn, I mean, I'm not saying that what I learned the same things that you learned or anything like that, but it's like just to have a, you know, a degree in that is related to psychotherapy. You learn lots of other what previous teachers have taught, or doctors or psychologists, psychiatrists, you know, and we bring that into like lots of theories, lots of paradigms and things like that. But now I can say, now that I've stepped away, because I have stepped away from that kind of work, I see that also as so much in a box. It's like, that doesn't, it like, for example, it really doesn't include the work of these two teachers that we're both familiar with that I mentioned, like Resmaa Menakem and Dr. Rocio. It doesn't involve any, you know, of that. So it's very white based, right? It's like coming from like this very analytical way of looking at things, theories and like all these things. But I realize now, and I didn't know it when I was in it so much, but I realize now like how much is actually missing, like how much from my own education and training was missing any understanding of race really in any depth, you know, like what it is to be in a black, I mean, not that I know this, but to understand at least when you're working with someone what it might be to be in a black body, to be in a body of culture or an indigenous brown body, however we want to look at that, and those thinking about these different bodies then and these different experiences, those are so much related to spirit in some way, I mean in different ways, but the connection to spirit, the connection to land, like the spirit of the earth, all of that, understanding the earth as its own spiritual entity kind of thing. That is so inherent to pretty much like every Black Indigenous tradition, you know, so brown, I don't know, like it's hard to say this culture is black, but all of it, like it's inherent to all of those. And it's interesting how like none of that really comes into Western psychology, you know, because it's, well, you know, it's like all these different theories and it's all these different designations. Oh, these lists of symptoms, these lists and durations, symptoms, durations, you know, and I do very much recall and did use like this in my training. It was like a biopsychosocial understanding. But now that I know what I know, I'm like, that was so limited also. And I mean, what is that? That's really dependent on the practitioner and the work they've done to be able to understand somebody else who maybe doesn't look like them, to kind of fit it into, like, these are, it's still so limited because it's still just fitting it into our own, you know, perception. I think I'm going a little off track, but the point is, the point is that our connection to something larger than us is healing. That is healing in itself. That brings relief. That brings comfort. That tells us, oh, we're not alone. That tells us, you know, like, perhaps this path is part of a larger journey. Perhaps this is just a small, you know, like just to get that perspective. I think it's so helpful. So I think it's very, very important to the spiritual aspect of a person's evolution, of their I was going to say like soul expression. If you believe in soul, that may be a word not everyone identifies with, but of a person's journey, of a person's path. And I don't think it's addressed that well at all in most like mental health training and paradigms.
I completely agree with everything you said. I was just snapping my fingers inside my mind. It's um, I think I've been uh, the way that my training has happened, it has been the way I've been working has been really focused on like, okay, like healing trauma, or helping people on their journeys of healing trauma, or healing from like internalized messages from like white supremacy and capitalism and colonialism. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's all really great, but there's this feeling of like, okay, but and then what? Is there something that is beyond this framework that I think is very ingrained in Western psychology, that there's something wrong with us and we can just fix it if we just do these techniques or use this therapeutic framework, we can fix the things in us that are hurting. Whereas I think when you integrate like a mind, body, spirit, a spiritual approach, there's a sense of everything we do is connected to something greater than just this moment in time. And yeah, I feel like I think you're meeting me at a time in my life that I'm making this transition, this journey in my career and in my life. I think it's always been a part of my journey of wanting to support particularly Black, Indigenous, and women of color bodies of culture, like on their journeys of reconnecting to their inner wisdom or their path, whatever that may be. And uh, yeah, I feel like you're meeting me at this a point of transition. I think that's why I'm very intrigued at the moment about the life, the death and rebirth process in nature, because I feel like that's what's happening in my career and in my process right now of allowing something to die a little bit or to take a bit of a back seat so that another kind of wisdom can come to the center of my work with people that I think is much more, um, much deeper than just, okay, you have a problem, let's solve it. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, very powerful. Um, I'm feeling very grateful to meet you here at this time, at this point that you're at, this moment. And two things stood out or just came up as you were sharing. One is this concept, and this comes up in Resmaa's, in his spaces, in his work, which is, and we say it to each other sometimes, but it's just this statement of, you are not defective, or for ourselves, I am not defective, because that's all part of the paradigm, is for us to believe that, that we are, when I say paradigm, the structure, right? The systemic structure, that to believe that we're defective in some ways very inherently, and then it shows up in work, and it shows up in different ways, but like this inherent, like, that we're defective. And so he'll remind us all the time. So it's so ingrained now, like, you're not defective, I'm not defective, we're not defective. And then this also, being in his class has been very interesting, because it's not at all like most learning spaces, especially what we're used to in Western educational spaces, where it's like, okay, we have these goals and we have this is the curriculum and this is what we're doing. It's not that at all. Instead, they basically talk about very much about this space of emergence. So it's like, it feels exactly like what you're sharing. It happens in any transition. It happens at any point when we're allowed to, or we give ourselves permission to let something die. So when we let something die, we're creating space, right? Like, we're naturally creating space, which we see in nature all the times. We let something die, and then there's I think by the general conditioning, or at least I'll just speak for myself, like, there's a tendency to, like, okay, something's gone, I've got to fill it, and like a anxiety around filling it with something. And there's always something to fill it. You can fill it with a relationship, a job, or like it's just some activity, whatever it is, you know. But it actually takes, like, if we take some wisdom from nature and just let it be, let the thing, whatever die, let that happen, and just wait and be patient and trust, then we allow for the emergence of what's wanting to come through. Like in nature, it's like not there yet, or it's just a seed, or it's just a, you know, um, but there's a process of being patient, I think, and trusting.
Yes, with that sense of patience. Um, I feel like that speaks really, really well to the cycles of, like with today being a new moon, this sense of there is darkness, we are not going to see the light for a little bit. But if we are patient, if we trust that nature will take its course, the universe will take its course, that there is always, where there's darkness, there's always light on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And these things, these experiences can coexist with one another, the darkness with the light in life. And I love what you were saying about that process of emergence. When I think of the word emergence, I'm thinking of a like a plant or a flower that is like waiting to bloom, but it has to be in the bud for a little while before it can fully come to its its full fruition. Just
Mm-hmm.
like just like people. But yeah, that was that's what's coming up today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. I love how we've woven in nature and just like the natural cycles and the wisdom in nature into understanding what we can experience in life, and how, yeah, there is a time for things to die. It's just natural. It's going to happen, whatever it is. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, and just like, yeah, like you said with the bud, just kind of waiting. And I think that piece we're not used to. I'm saying I'm not used to, I haven't been used to it. It's like I have had it happen in my life, of course, but like, there's a bit of the uncertainty, the anxiety that comes, like, especially if we can't see the bud yet. We're like, well, this part is going, but I don't know what's coming, but there's so much beauty in that. There's so much magic in that
Yeah. I think magic is the right word. It's like life is full of surprises, and
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like um, yeah, I feel like anxiety is my best friend, apparently. And we really walk life together at this time.
Mm-hmm.
That anxiety, that sense of uncertainty of when something in our life has to die, not fully, it's like really wanting to know for certain and to really be able to see that, okay, there's something else that I'm moving towards that I can hold on to. And I think in the space between is where faith comes in. Like faith in ourselves, faith in the process, faith in nature, faith in, I don't know, karma or spirit, whatever people's belief system may be. That, um, yeah, yeah, that's, thank you for offering that the space to talk about that. Yeah, I feel like it's something that I think a lot of people can resonate with.
Absolutely.
The anxiety that can come up from when you're waiting,
Hmm.
when you're still in the bud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, what you mentioned about faith, it's really, I think that speaks to what you were talking before about what you were bringing about spirituality. Like it's that when we have faith, and whatever that is and however that shows up for us, but when we have faith, we can have trust and we can have a deep knowing that we're just where we're meant to be, that it's going to be okay, you know, that all is well, that kind of feeling. And that goes a huge way for anyone, you know, like with, especially what's coming to me is like with mental health struggles and things. It's like, that's huge. And just, it's just so interesting how that's not really in my education, in my experience, in my training, and all these years of that I was in that, I don't feel like that was touched hardly at all. And yet it's really it it can have such a big impact on a person. From two people going through the same thing, if one person has a bit of faith in, like, you know, faith and trust, it's just a huge difference, I think.
I really feel that. I feel like there's so many things. There's like a million things I want to talk to you about, questions. And I feel like this conversation could last like 10 hours or more. I just feel like there's so much wisdom we can share between ourselves. And but at the same time, I know that we'll leave this conversation and there's some things that won't be said or won't be shared. But I feel like in this time we've been speaking, I've been feeling there's like an energy in the things we've been talking about that I find is very, at least for me, very grounding.
Mm-hmm.
That um, I feel like there's such a simplicity that comes with talking about nature and nature's cycles and how that kind of can mirror um, people's cycles, especially with their mental health journeys. And there's a sense of simplicity, but also complexity that comes with that. And yeah, I'm just really trying to ground myself into that. Sometimes the deepest, most impactful truths can be the simplicity of within the simplicity.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much for coming on the conversation. I agree. I feel like we could talk for hours and hours.
I'm holding back.
um, I really appreciated taking a look at the website and work, and I'd love for you to share a bit more about where people can find you and your work.
Yeah, thank you for taking a look at my website. It's under a little bit of construction right now as I'm going through this transition process. But people can find me at ShalynIsaacs.com. It's just my first name, my last name, .com. Or on my Instagram, Shalyn Isaacs underscore psychotherapy. And yeah, those are the two places we can connect. So I'd love to hear from anyone who's watching this.
Yes, thank you. Well, lovely. I will share this with. Hopefully, the sound is okay. I don't know weird times, but um, I'll make sure to share it and share your contact info and yeah, I would welcome another conversation sometime, maybe as you're going through your transition, and if something else, feels alive, please feel free to reach out. Um, what was I going to share? There's one little thing I'm doing that is just like a one, it came out of a workshop I did last week, but it's just like a one session, like a 45-minute um, kind of exploration of what I'm calling erotic embodiment, the art of seducing the melanated spirit. And I love that word seduction. It's like the idea is just exploring, like, yeah, the connection to our our erotic self, our pleasure, and kind of what can come up for in doing that. I found last week that several people shared that there's a lot of resistance to pleasure, and given everything that we've talked about, I feel like it's all this conditioning, it's everything that we hold that says that doesn't really give us any permission to do this. When we try to, or we try to do an embodiment practice, it's like all this comes up. So it's kind of about, yeah, exploring that for a very low cost. So yeah, I just wanted to share it. I just wanted to say it, actually. So the marketing is not my forte, so I'm still learning a lot.
That's like you're great, by the way. Like, much better than I am. I'm just like, there's this thing, come or don't, but so you're good. That was beautiful. Um, I love the language you use to describe what you're sharing with the world. I just feel like there's a really, it's so different, and I feel like the embodiment of the language you use. I took your self-care workshop, and
Thank you.
it was really amazing. And there was an exercise around like using language to describe your intentions, and like really allowing that the language of the intention to fall in your body. And yeah, I just feel like the way that you use language and just your work in general is so beautiful and so needed for this world. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that reflection. Appreciate it. Um, it reminds me of the thing we're talking about death and life, and there's been a lot of deaths of, in this work, of like death of a career that was a process, but like now I'm like moving in a totally different direction, and then even in this, it's like I was going to work with all women and just do sensuality, which I think is, I'm still very passionate about, embodiment, very passionate about. But then it was like, as I got deeper with these teachers and in some of the things that we've talked about, it's like, no, that's not who I'm here for. I'm really here to serve like Black, Brown, Indigenous bodies and things like that. So I really appreciate your reflections. It means a lot. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. I look forward to connecting further with yours and sharing your work and uplifting it, and also just connecting further. I'd love to do another conversation like this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I
So
love that.
I would love that. So let's just see what naturally
Yeah,
kind of evolves for us.
that sounds good. I love that. Um, yeah, thank you so much for having me and connecting. This was so much fun to talk with you.
Oh, it was so good. I'm just so excited because it's been really since December, I think, when we were messaging. So it's been a while.
Yes, and we were supposed to have a conversation in February after I came back from
Oh, yes.
my time away in Alberta, and then I came back and was like, I need a vacation from my vacation, and don't feel that way anymore. So I'm
Oh,
happy we got to connect now.
yeah. And I'm very excited to hear a little bit about the transition and to hear more about what emerges through it. It is like what we were talking about. It's really is a magical time as you shed, let things die, whatever needs to happen to give space to what's like calling you, what's emerging from you. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. I'm excited to share it with you. It's a really beautiful, magical, difficult, messy journey, but I am enjoying it. As you know, I'm very comfortable in the dark, messy places. So I know there's something on the other side of this.
Mm,
And in the midst of it, there's beauty in it. So
yes, yes, yes. And it is new moon in Leo. It's supposed to be a potent time, really, for bringing forth something, letting something die. Yeah.
honestly, yes, I feel like the new moon in Leo, like that sense of like confidence, leadership, a very like outward kind of energy, which um, I feel like I really do not naturally gravitate towards that. I'm very like, I will go hide in this corner over here in this dark little space, and
Yeah.
I really gravitate towards like hiding, being very shy. So engaging this conversation with you, trying to share my work more with people, sharing like my essence through writing and speaking through my work. I feel like is kind of where I'm going at the moment, slowly coming out of my little cancer crab shell.
Are you Cancer?
Yes,
Oh, I'm Pisces. We're both like
water.
water.
Yeah, love it.
Not surprised.
That's amazing. Not surprised.
It's so good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And you hit on another just topic there about like letting yourself be seen, which I think we could have a whole discussion about because I am super introvert Pisces. Like I just want to hide too most of the time. And all of this work has pushed me to my edges to like be visible, to be seen, and to use my voice. And it's also been messy, to say the least.
I'm so glad that you listened to that part of you and have been like showing up and taking up space because it's how I found you and your work. And I'm sure, like, I think when you like show up and create, like, express yourself, um, it makes space for other people who resonate with you to find you. It's like um, it's like sending out a frequency to the people who are your people who resonate, and it's like welcome.
Oh,
So I will let you go. Thank you
yeah.
so much for this conversation.
Thank you. Sending you lots of love. And until next time,
Until next time, yes, thank you.
thanks
Bye.
everyone. Bye.